I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support. Hello. Morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, wherever you are around the world. So happy that you're here. Welcome. You're home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. We're almost to the new year. We've got 4 more episodes, including today on the UCR Top 10. We end this Friday. And then boom, New Year's here. Come next Monday, you guys. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are too. I think 2022 is going to be a lot of fun. We kind of talked about it last night. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Of course, want to also remind you, this show's available on podcasts, iTunes, Spotify. Please go leave us a rate and review. Helps the podcast grow. It's insane. It's getting so big every month. So we truly appreciate your support there. Also, we have other ways to support the show with Patreon and our super chats here in the YouTube channel. Either way, either one, we truly love, we truly appreciate. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show monthly. We are a public access channel, so we're supported by viewers like you. So please consider doing some super chats or Patreon. If you can't, no worries. It's all good. There's no paywall here. Just like, share, subscribe. Definitely share the show. If you love the show, share it. We truly appreciate the support. Okay, you guys, moderators out there. Hello, moderators. Welcome. Preston Paget. I see you're in the chat. What's up, Preston? I just sent you an invitation to come talk on the show. Hopefully you can come. That would be really cool. Okay. Let's see here. Did you guys see my cool Tic Tac? See the sticker? Both of these things are on the merch store. Links are down below. So check it out if you want to get yourself a cool hoodie for this winter. These are pretty fun. All right. Let's get started with today's show, because we don't have a lot of time. This interview takes pretty much the whole 2 hours. Ryan Sprague, what's up? Let me say hello to everybody in the chat. I'm also excited for this one as well, my friend. Let's see here. Let's go out to, all right. UAP Doyle, what's happening? He says your mom sucks, but not this show. A low budget. In my low budget show? Yeah, absolutely. We're insanely low budget. We embrace the low budget around here. Neurostream, I think this has been a nice way for the UCR crew, especially Luis, to get some well-deserved R&R for the holidays. I agree. These have been fun, a lot more relaxing. I just started sending out invitations for new interviews in the new year. We've got some really fun guests that I've reached out to, including Preston, who's in the chat. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of Ryan Sprague, and depending on what happens, legislatively speaking, or from a private industry standpoint, we'll be covering it here. So make sure you ring that bell. All right, let's see who else is in the chat. Stephen Marshall, welcome. Hi, Lou. How's it going? It's going very well. Thank you for being here. Roger Davies. Hello, all, says Roger Davies. Hello, Roger Davies. I'm pogging, like pogs, like those discs. Welcome. Either way, whatever you're doing. Beth Blinn, you're a new fan. I'm a new fan of you. Thank you so much for being here. Truly appreciate it. Swink McLeod. Evening, everyone. Evening, Swink. Bunk Wild. 13 crusty mofos. 16, 17? What's happening? What are you counting? Good evening from Panama, Luis, UCR crew. And to all of you and to you all. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for being here from Panama. Awesome. Preston Paget with Hey Now. I made love to my wife to the sounds of DOS tapes. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll turn them up on that note. They got a new album coming out, you guys. Get excited for it. Autumn Leaf Holidays, happy holidays, holidays, happy holidays, Luis. Thank you so much, Autumn Leaf. I truly appreciate it. Happy holidays and happy New Year to you. Ryan Sprague is excited for this one. Thank you for being here, my brother. Night Gazer, hello, my good sir. Now I become death crazy about NASA hiding unclassified info. Yeah, that is a little crazy. Yeah, we got to get John Greenwald in here to talk about that. There's been so much happening with the FOIA requests in these last 2 weeks. I'll be honest with you, I disconnected from a lot of stuff, or basically other than this show for 2 hours every day to do these replays. I haven't really looked at anything. I've shared a couple things that I've seen, a couple of articles that I read, but I'm trying to really disconnect for the rest of the year. Until we get back into it, but yeah, we got to get Greenwald in here. We got to talk about that because that's very interesting. Hello, Ryan Sprague, says Night Gazer. Finer Sky, Hyde Lou, looking crisp. Oh, thank you. Low budget. Have you seen this new camera? Yeah. Have you seen this new camera? I guess you're right. Nothing low budget now. The girl did good. My girl did good. Michelle, you did good, girl. On this camera, people love it. UCR is a high budget AF. Low budget, but the best. Well, you guys, thank you so damn much for being here. Hey, there's Aaron Desario. Hello, everyone. Steve Devine. Hello from Scotland. Damn, Scotland in the house. That's amazing. McEwen here. All right, let's see. Who else is new? All right, everybody. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's get started with number 4 on our top 10 UCR countdown, and it is an interview that we did with Ralph Blumenthal and then also Tim Mcmillan. Ralph comes in at the half-hour mark, and Tim leaves around the hour mark, even though he was supposed to leave technically after the first half hour. But the conversation was so interesting that he just ended up staying for the first hour, I believe, if not maybe even the whole show. I can't remember, honestly. There've been so many interviews, and I'm starting to get to a point now where I can't remember every single interview and every single detail what happened in every interview. So it's gonna be cool to go back and watch this. But I do remember this being a very, very interesting conversation and one of my favorite of the year. So I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. This was the first time Tim Mcmillan was on the show. And I believe this was the first time Ralph Blumenthal was on the show, other than the big phone home, but those were all panels. This was his first solo appearance. So a really fun conversation. And it's also an interesting perspective into how specifically the New York Times, which is part of the mainstream media, decide when and when not to run stories by writers that have done work for them for decades. And how I just don't know how the decision process really works on that stuff at an editing and publishing perspective from a newspaper standpoint. But you've got Ralph Blumenthal, who's covered obviously all of John Mack's work and brought a lot of legitimacy to this abduction conversation that we're having. And in this conversation, he had just released an article on the Debrief about 5 witnesses or experiencers to the abduction phenomenon. And it was a really cool interview on the Debrief, and I linked this entire video just in case we don't get through all of it today in the description below, so definitely check it out. All right, y'all, I'll be checking in. If there's any commercials, I will skip them, so sorry if that does happen, but enjoy this conversation with Ralph Blumenthal and Tim Mcmillan and Michael Mataluni. Cheers. For sure. No, time off is needed. Okay, so let's get into this. We've got Ralph Blumenthal coming in at 1:30 to talk about this article that he put on the Debrief. And by the way, I just found out we're the first folks to interview Ralph since this interview dropped. So that's insanely exciting.
That's very exciting, and we got to give it to the folks over at the Debrief because they tipped us off yesterday. They said we got a big article coming tomorrow. Do you guys want to talk to Ralph about it? And we're like, absolutely. And then we've got the rest of the Debrief team reached out and we're like, anything you guys need, any support you need in this developing story, we got your back. And it's like unreal how amazing those guys are over at the Debrief.
And then they really Then they won up that offer, and Tim McMillan said, "Hey, you want me to come on for about a half hour and talk about why the New York Times is scared to publish this article?" Yes, please. Yes, please. Without further ado, Mr. Tim McMillan, what's shaking, brother?
First of all, I love that you threw me on there after that. I don't know why the New York Times is scared to publish.
They're scared. They're scared. Tim McMillan's not. And he knows the answers.
Us, yeah, throw Tim under it. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's been a while.
Okay, so maybe Tim doesn't have the answers, but he's going to provide maybe some clarity to the situation.
Insight.
Some insight. Because I think I'll say it seems like they're scared. It seems like the New York Times is not interested in this because it's out of their realm of comfort. But let's hear from Tim. I mean, I want to know how this story came together, and sort of what you wanted to bring to the table, and sort of preface the interview with Ralph today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, as you so eloquently alluded there, this was an article that Ralph had evidently, for those who don't know, spent almost 4 decades at the New York Times, a former journalist, editor. So, I mean, he's very well established there. And as most should know, him and Leslie Kane are responsible for a lot of the news a lot of what we know now kind of came from them. And so this was an article that he evidently had pitched to the New York Times, and I don't know all the specifics. I'll let Ralph, if he wants to share any of those. But it was a story that they evidently didn't pick up, which I want to say is not totally crazy.
Surprising.
In the media world.
No, I can understand why. It makes sense. I totally get it, but.
Well, even not just the subject matter. I think there's a lot of people out there who would say, "Hey, man, I've pitched the Debrief, and MJ's told me, nah, we'll pass. The outlets establish what they want to be, what their identity is, and some things they just say, no, we don't want to run." In this instance, we were fortunate because it was interesting. I think somebody shared a video of Ralph talking about, "Hey, I had this really cool thing. I'd interviewed some experiencers, and nobody, or the New York Times, didn't want to run it." Somebody tagged me, and I'm like, "Hey, all right, cool." And I think I commented and on it, but that was it. Ironically enough, it'd be a couple of days later, Ralph actually reached out to us and said, "Is this something you'd be interested in?" So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was funny when I read it. I had heard the first part. The Times didn't want to run it, and I read it and I went, "Okay, well, he's not arguing to like lower the age of consent here. He's not, he doesn't say he wanted a panda fur coat. This is not as controversial as people maybe make it out to be." And I think most importantly for us, we can kind of sum up why did the Debrief run it? Well, it's because it fits in who we are. Our motto is rebelliously curious, and this absolutely meets that criteria. And so I think it is, and I know a lot of people, if you're going to talk UFOs, you're going to cover UFOs, the experiencers, let's just say, which I think kind of encompasses a lot of things. People who believe that they have faced alien abductions or even just encounters, we say. I think that's always going to be the proverbial elephant in the room when you talk UFOs, because it does exist, and it's interesting because it exists with a high degree of prevalence. I mean, there's a significant number of people who make these claims. And I think that what with this story, and when we say we're rebelliously curious, is we wanted to hear that perspective. And most importantly, we felt like people wanted to hear that and should hear it, because in this instance, it's interesting. And this kind of relates to the whole UFO topic. It may frustrate people, may upset people. But there's no ground truth here yet established. There's no ground foundational truth. Now, unfortunately, what that means is that both critics and believers, which I'm using that term loosely, they can't ever, there's a lot of arguments over who's right, but when there's no ground truth, no one can be wrong. And so until there's any ground truth there and that's established, we don't know what's going on. And so I know that a lot of people, and I'm sure Ralph, who spent considerably more time on this topic, I'm sure he'll discuss his work with John Mack's book and that type of thing. He knows this subject more intimately. But if you just look at the academic and empirical evidence, there's no ground truth there. And I think that's important, is that there, a lot of people will say that this relates to sleep paralysis, that type of thing. There's actually no scientific evidence to back that up. There's definitely some studies done, and I think that's what's fascinating. So that if it is what some people believe, which is some sort of undiagnosed or unrecognized psychological disorder, that's not been proven. And in fact, conversely, if you actually look at the serious peer-reviewed studies, it's the exact opposite. It's saying, well, it doesn't fit this. I mean, you'll hear a lot of people say that these are repressed traumatic memories. There's a good study in a cognitive psychology journal a couple of years ago who said, out of their cases, only 2% were found to have fit that criteria. So the majority, 98%, didn't fit that criteria. Same with sleep paralysis. You'll see the studies will say, well, it doesn't fit that. So there's not really any good diagnostic standard there. So it is a lingering question that there's definitely some extraordinary claims, and there's does it have an extraordinary conclusion? I don't know, but it is a lingering question, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being rebelliously curious about that. Why shouldn't we want to answer it?
That's a great answer.
Yeah, it's a great philosophy too, because it's so difficult, right? Because we'll get, we get pushback here. We're not journalists, we're commentators, and we bring people in and we do interviews with lots of different people, and we get a lot of pushback from people who are frustrated with the people that we allow and give platform to, when we're really just trying to get as much information from as many different perspectives as possible, so that we can bring some understanding to a very complex topic that has no ground truth. So is that how you guys deal with that? I know, obviously MJ is your editor-in-chief, and he's fantastic. And I'm curious what goes on inside when it comes to what stories you guys decide to run that are rebelliously curious, but where do you draw the line?
Well, you definitely try to draw the line where there's some legitimacy to it. And I think it helps when you're talking about someone like Ralph Blumenthal, who does have, let's take all the UFO stuff out, who does have, like I said, decades of experience in journalism at one of the institutions that arguably has been called the world's news source. It's not news till the Times says it. So, this is somebody that's got some credentials behind it, let's say, who's covering it. And then you determine like how deep dive is this, or how outlandish, or is there at least some subjective evidence here? In this case, there is, because you have not only the experiencers that Ralph covered in the article, but you have a lot of people who make these similar claims. And so you do have this kind of lingering subjective evidence that's out there that says something is going on, that you don't have any objective evidence to meet behind that.
Right.
And so, it's not, if somebody said, hey, I want to write a story about there being werewolves on the moon, that's not something that we really even have any anecdotal evidence. We don't have anything. Yeah. But in this case, and I think that, again, maybe it's one that strikes personally interesting to me, because I think if you listen to some of these accounts, there definitely appears to be a genuine belief by people. They're genuine in what they're saying, and it's interesting because it's not very rarely, I would say, in the accounts that you hear that seem most likely, they're not happy about it. This isn't something they're parading around, and so that's intriguing. What's going on here. And I think that ultimately, like you said, MJ is the editor. He kind of makes those calls. But I think as a group collectively, we say, yeah, this represents what we want to be out there. Maybe it doesn't for other outlets. That's okay. I mean, that's why we exist.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was gonna say, Michael and I do catch a lot of flack for talking about this sometimes, because it's like, even as an experiencer, and again, people define that differently for themselves. I mean, I didn't see beings, I just saw a ship. Who was in that ship? I have no clue. So I don't know if it's extraterrestrial. So I don't like to put my finger on it and say, oh, I know what it is. And when we get into this conversation, even for me, it's very, very, very difficult to keep those BS alarms in my head going. Like, it's hard. I'm really trying to put my personal beliefs to the side and just trying to listen. And I'm curious, like, what do you think is because Michael and I have been talking about this, and we're trying to figure out the best way to discuss this aspect of this phenomenon, this experiencer aspect, this close encounters of the third and fourth kind, where they're having experiences with beings. And they describe it, and Ralph describes it in his article as real as this conversation is happening right now. So how do we discuss this while being sensitive to this group of people that clearly exist, that clearly have a voice, that clearly need to be validated, but at the same time, not just believe everything that's said? Like, we can't just be like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's so real. It's hard because it's a hard concept for the person telling the story to wrap their mind around. So let alone the person who's consuming this story, it's even more difficult for them. So how do we get the experiencers to understand that, hey, what you're saying, no offense, sounds bleeping crazy. But as someone who hasn't had that experience, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to suspend my bias and everything that I've learned in life, and willing to listen and open my mind to the information. But I just don't want to I'm going to say I don't want to believe it just with no evidence. I need something. And is that wrong of me to say? Like, this is why it's hard to talk about this, but I'm curious, like, what do you think is the best strategy to sort of have this discussion?
Well, first of all, I mean, you're asked, that's a question that's really deep. And I think it's one that extends far beyond just this particular topic, or even going back centuries. I think that one thing that kind of behooves everybody, and it's a good exercise of kind of mental exercise, philosophical, is kind of defining what is reality. We define reality as the majority purview of what is agreed upon as reality. But is subjective reality real or not? And that's a very interesting question. And like I said, this is not a scientific debate. This is a philosophical debate. But even in science, there's no such thing as abject reality. There is no such thing as absolute. If you looked at any scientific study, you're going to see, whatever the conclusion result is going to be concluded at a certain degree, statistically significant degree. It's not going to be 100%. It can be 99. Right. And so we ask ourselves, well, what about that one? Did it never happen? Was it not real? And it's a really, I don't have a good answer for you. It's a very loaded question. As somebody coming from a background as a police profiler, criminal profiler, and my college background is in cognitive psychology, is trying to apply that type of trait. Is that always foolproof and 100%? No. But I will say that one of the things that I have noticed, and this is just me saying in my experience and talking to people over the years, we've talked about experiences, whether they be as dramatic as feeling like they have had close personal contact with something that's non-human, or they just saw something that is anomalous. Those people tend to don't be as eager to share those stories. These aren't the people that you're going to typically hear on the conference circuit, not putting anybody down who is, not saying they're not telling the truth, but these are, I think, some of the most compelling ones are the people that you talk to and they almost seem ashamed to have experienced this. And I don't mean that to be degrading. I mean that a part of them feel like, I understand this is not supposed to be real.
Right.
But yet it was. So it's this weird kind of where you get this peek into a minority reality, where you have this minority of the population who has faced this reality, but the majority says that is not real. And so I don't have a good answer for you. I think that in reading the work done by John Mack, which he said Ralph profiled, he did his biography and did a phenomenal job. I think that's one of the interesting kind of conclusions that Dr. Mack came to. Especially if you read his second book, is he's saying, like, is this aliens? I don't know. Is this what it is? I don't know. But I think it raises this interesting question that extends beyond into the realms that a lot of people might describe as woo-woo, and kind of, because it is. Now we're talking about something that's very subjective and there is no ground truth to it. But is it real or not? I guess you have to define what is reality.
What's your
real quick, Michael? I'm sorry,
okay.
I don't want to cut off your question, but I also don't want to lose these super chats. Okay, I just want to acknowledge them. Haley Maspark, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker. And then we also had a $10 super chat statement from Kristen Blackburn. Thank you, my lady. So glad you're doing this story. Ralph Blumenthal has one of the most balanced voices and experiencers with a capital E. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. And then we had a $5 donation from our partner in crime here, Christina Gomez, Tim McMillan, Luis Jimenez, Mike Mataluni, practically the A-team right here. Smash that like button. I like that. Practically the A-team. So we're like the B++
Close.
team. Yeah.
So
we're like we're the 89% team.
Right.
Reminds me of high school.
Exactly. Well, look, so Tim, I know we have you till 1:30, but we did have Ralph just pop in backstage. So let's bring the two of you on here just for 15 minutes and maybe we can sort of cross the streams here, so to speak.
A bit.
Mr. Ralph Blumenthal, man of the hour, wonderful article today. First off, thank you for being here and giving us the opportunity to sort of have a first crack at this story that you wrote today. How you doing?
Great to be with you and great to see you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, Ralph, great to see you as well. It's an exciting piece. We were glad to have an opportunity to put it out there. I think it's fun. It generated a lot of buzz, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I saw a lot of comment. Thank you.
Well, we got a hit, gentlemen. Here we go. Now, I think we just went from the 89% team to definitely at least 90.
Now we're the A team.
Now we're definitely the A team. I mean, it's not an A plus.
Average up. For sure.
Real quick, $9.99 donation. Tim, also thanks a lot for what you've done in and out of the UAP territory. Those TED Talks.
Oh, yeah.
Loves it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Haley.
Yeah, this is a lot of people don't bring that up, but that's nice. Thank you, Haley. And so there, to further answer your question, Luis, that early on is why would we be interested in talking about experiences on Debrief? Is that in large part all of us, and particularly me, are no stranger to controversial things, because the TED Talk that's being referred to there is back when I was in law enforcement, and I talked about law enforcement needing to be better in race relations before it was popular, and that there are aspects of law enforcement that we needed to do a better job in policing. And so it's not necessarily, you don't make a lot of friends within your own community when you say, hey guys, I think there's certain things we're doing that are not proportionate universally. And so, yeah, no stranger to controversy, but you try to do what's right, I guess.
Mike, you had a question that I'd cut you off before. What was it?
Well, yeah, I did. I mean, and this will go for Ralph too. It's perfect timing as well. You made a really interesting point, Tim, about, what is the nature of reality, and is reality simply majority rules, or, to what level are these things subjective? And you can talk to a theoretical physicist and they'll tell you that the third law of, Newton's third law of thermodynamics is not a law. It happens 99.9999999% of the time, which isn't a law. It's not an absolute, and there are no absolutes. So my question, I guess, let's maybe turn this over to Ralph in having these conversations, because we want to be talking to experiencers more, but we want to be extremely thoughtful in our approach. I'm curious, Ralph, how do you approach this sort of topic as a journalist? Because your job and your goal is to get to the truth. How do you work with people who have had traumatic experiences, and also do everything in your power to get to the ground truth as much as possible?
It's clearly anecdotal, and that stops a lot of people. I was on a show recently with Avi Loeb of Harvard, who has a very controversial thesis about Oumuamua, that object that came into our solar system, the first extraterrestrial object into our solar system, and disappeared before anybody could really figure out what it was. It was only after it left that the scientists began pondering it and saw some very strange anomalies. And he's very troubled by the anecdotal aspect of these experiences accounts, and he is by no means a believer or proponent of alien abduction. But he also, recognizes, and I think this is interesting in his book, that the scientific community acts some ways as a dictatorship and very unscientific in terms of its openness to to new findings. And they have been very outspoken against him, Avi Loeb, and his thesis, which I think he puts forth very well in his book. I mean, he points out all the things that are strange about this object that make it, in his view, likely to be a not man-made, but an intelligent-made object, right, not naturally occurring. A wind sail, perhaps, of some kind, a probe, a buoy in the universe, but anything but, a naturally occurring rock. So, but the scientific establishment has really ganged up against him and said that, it can't be. And he, like John Mack, his predecessor at Harvard, said that the scientific community is really the last bastion of political correctness or scientific correctness or whatever, that does not open itself to actual data. And that's what we're really talking about, data. And these experiencers have stories that don't comport or whatever the word is, with our notions of reality. And yet John Mack could not find any other explanation for their experiences. All the things that, the debunkers and the so-called skeptics, throw out there fall short. And I feel the same way. I don't have the background John Mack had, but I've talked to these experiences as my article for the Debrief shows, and it's completely strange, and yet these people have no physical, mental aberrations other than the strange experiences they've had. So there you go.
Any thoughts on that, Tim? On Mike's question?
No, I think Ralph answered it perfectly, and I think that John Mack is a good case study in this kind of examining this phenomenon and wanting to examine it legitimately, because I think it's important for people to understand that. And again, Ralph is much more of an expert on John than I am, but in reading his works, Dr. Mack did not get into this a quote believer or under the auspice that I'm going to prove aliens, I'm going to solve what's going on here. It was more, in my opinion, exactly correctly what an academic, what a researcher, what a clinical psychologist should do, which is say, okay, we potentially have a undiagnosed or unrecognized mental disorder, and so I'm going to investigate it like a scientist. And in the process of doing that, came to the same conclusion that he's not alone in. He's just the most famous because he stuck through that. But there are other researchers who have done empirical studies and have had to come out in the results. And you can Google Scholar it, where they go, it doesn't fit this, so we can't say that it's mass delusions, which isn't a real thing. It's not this, it's not this. So we got to keep searching. And so he did what you're supposed to do, what science says you're supposed to do. He didn't set out to prove that alien abductions were real. He set out to prove what was going on, and then just continue to follow where the data went. And I think it's like Ralph said, it is disappointing, if anything, especially when you're talking about something like science and academia, where we depend on for breakthroughs. We're going to get new discoveries to say, whoa, now we can follow the data to a point. But now we're talking crazy talk. And it's like, how do we find out anything new? If this is everything there is to it, and we know there isn't, that's silly. So how do we find out something new? And, go ahead.
Yeah,
Mike.
I was just going to say it's such an important point. You guys both brought up the exact same point, and Avi Loeb brought it up recently as well. This idea that if you see something anomalous, the majority of academia steps up and says, I kind of wish that wasn't there, because it disrupts our belief system about what we already know. I mean, you look at the story that just broke a few days ago about the humans inhabiting Central and North America. I mean, we're constantly pushing the boundaries of what we think we know and we think we understand, yet people within academia want to hold on to things that may or may not be the truth. And I think that's a damn shame. Do you guys see that changing at any point, or do you see the light at the end of the tunnel here?
It's a long, slow process. And everybody from Darwin to Copernicus to Freud, who waded into this field, faced it. A lot of setbacks, a lot of prejudice. Actually, one of the best illustrations of this collision happened to John Mack at Harvard. Harvard convened the secret, I call it an inquisition. It was a committee to investigate his practices, and it was like two different worlds colliding. He said in an unpublished manuscript, when worldviews collide. Nice play on the old movie, when worlds collide. But these people were adamant at Harvard, saying that reality is what we see, taste, and touch. That's it. If you can't hit it like a table, or smell it, or taste it, or see it, it ain't there. It don't exist. That just left out a lot of experiences we don't understand, like love, like
the atomic realm, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, like the survival of consciousness. People have seen things at the portals of death that no one can explain. So and I was going to say that anybody who wants to learn more about John Mack's approach should read his first book, Abduction. He has 13 case studies. He takes tremendous pains to interview these 13 people whose names he conceals. He doesn't give them, although some of them came forward later under their real names, so we know who they are. But he spent a lot of time investigating their stories and trying to understand what had happened to them in conventional terms, and failed. And what he did prove was that these are absolutely normal people, except for what they say happened to them. But other than that, they were not driven crazy by their, they were not crazy and had these experiences. If anything, they developed problems as a result of these experiences, which no one could explain. So, but he was a very serious researcher, as you said properly, and you see it in these 13 case studies. They're fantastic examples of psychological workups.
Here's a picture of the book. Oh, well, had a picture of the book and then it disappeared. Oh, where'd it go?
While you do that,
they forced that commercial. I can't even skip that.
Please. Real quick. Do you find any cognitive dissonance? Says, do you find any common threads among experiencers, and how do you determine their original common threads versus manufactured with intent to deceive?
There are none. In short, John Mack tried to find some common denominator that would explain, that they're all like this, and this is why they have these experiences, or say they've had these experiences. And he couldn't. They came from all walks of life. There were children as young as 2 years old who were not, taking their cue from movies or books or, or whatever. They say, they're lying in their crib and they're playing with their little toy and saying, "Little man, take me up in the sky. I fly in the sky." This is a 2-year-old kid. And the mother says, "What?" And she was an experiencer too. So she was like sort of dreading what he was coming out with. But John Mack talked to the kid and said, "This kid is not making it up. He had some kind of an experience that we can't explain." So in short, the answer, Mike, to your question is that there is no common denominator that explains, oh, they're all like this, or they're rape victims, and therefore they're, sublimating their rape experience to pretend that, that they were raped by aliens. It's not that easy.
Right. And it's not to say that that's not a possibility in a small percentile, but from what you understand in your research into John Mack specifically, none of the cases that passed his filter were that. Is that accurate?
Right. Yes, it's true that there were some people who came forward who were disturbed. He weeded them out, or tried to. So you're absolutely right. What I say in my book, The Believer, these people were normal. By normal, I mean they had conflicts with their parents and their children and siblings. They were rape victims. They were traumatized. They went through PTSD. They were a cross-section of humanity, and humanity is not, pristine and perfect. They've had all kinds of terrible experiences, but the experiences they had did not explain the abduction accounts that they gave. So that's the crucial thing. Not that they were perfect and untouched by, any trauma in life, but that it didn't explain what, the stories that they came up with.
Right.
Well, real quick, let's go ahead and give Tim the floor here. If you have any final thoughts, because I know you got to go. You've got a football game to get to tomorrow morning.
Yeah, early morning. It's late night here in Germany, and an early morning football game. But no, I think it was fantastic to have an opportunity to publish Ralph's article. And I guess the overarching question when we started this is, well, why would the Debrief be willing to publish this when other outlets wouldn't? Or, why would you be willing to go that route? But because we should be. I mean, I think we should be, because as Ralph said, I mean, this is something that's going on, and it's something that's affected a lot of people, and there is no general or scientific consensus. And I think if you looked at that, both from researchers like John Mack, who have done the significant work specifically to this, you can look into, the American Psychological Association, who publishes the Bible of disorders, who went and tried in 2002 and said, we can't come up with a diagnosis criteria to make this fit as a disorder. We do not have one. So this is not a disorder. So what is it? I think that's a lingering question. And I think that it's unfortunate if people, who want to pursue it with true academic vigor and try to make some sense of the subjective nature and maybe bring it into a realm that's more objective, are stifled with that I think that you can't publish that you can't talk about that. That's where we get stuff. There's a study it's public online. You can find it. It's an empirically published study. An anthropologist I spoke to who spent time with Aborigines, Aboriginal distant people, in their UFO beliefs. And so his study's really good. He interviewed all these people who believed in alien abductions. They believed they had been abducted. They believed that they were seeing UFOs and aliens. And his whole thesis and conclusion was that their prevailing belief of what was encountering to them came from their very, very limited contact with Western culture and movies. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of a stretch, but okay. I don't know what he was there. I wasn't. So I don't know what their access to Independence Day or the movies or Netflix was, but it still left that lingering part that I think is frustrating, which was, and I asked him, well, what were they seeing? Like, he never disputed it. And it's very much like John Mack's work or other people who do this work. He had people from 6 years old to 60 saying they said it happened to them. So it's this really good segment. You just take a random lump of the population, and that's what he was getting. And I said, well, fine. If you believe that they were interpreting these events through the cultural lens of what popular media, that's fine. But what were they seeing?
Right.
What was happening? And it's unfortunately it's left off there. So I think at least having an opportunity to put this information out in any kind of media format, in any kind of forum, I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. I think that's what media outlets are supposed to do.
And I think you're right, man. And I think this article sort of holds a mirror up to society and says, hey, we're going to have to talk about this at some point. You can keep putting this off as much as you want, but at some point we're going to have this discussion. So it's nice to see that you guys are sort of the first on the block to start having this discussion. Of course, we're standing on the shoulders of people like John Mack and Ralph Blumenthal here. But we have to start talking about this. Like, it's at some point. And I don't know, is that today, do you think, before you get out of here?
Well, I'd love to take credit for it, everything, but I think just this past week, I think The Guardian actually published an article that dipped their toes into this part of it. But I do believe, because they're so intimately linked, the UFO topic with this, that it's going to be the proverbial elephant in the room. And so if there's going to be, and I talked about this a lot when I was on the show last week, about the necessity for science in terms of evaluating these sightings and bringing the information people want, I think that can equally be done in this. But so if somebody reads it and says, hey, it's not crazy if I want to do my college thesis on this, I want to pick up where John Mack left off, because I think for a lot of these people, and again, this is a better question for Ralph because he's spoken to many more experiences, but I think for a lot of these people, having an answer one way or another would be okay. Like, I think if you were to say, hey, this is some type of delusional disorder, you're not crazy, but this is what's going on, I think a lot of people would be okay with
that.
Yeah. John Mack was hoping to find something like that, if it were only as easy as that. And people who went to see him were disappointed when he told them, I can't explain what you're going through, and they would say, gee, I was hoping you'd tell me I was crazy.
Right.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because that would be an easy explanation. But what the other explanation, that they're seeing things that are completely otherworldly or unexplainable, is deeply troubling to a lot of people. And there are, support groups meeting. I referenced some of them in the article that I just wrote for you guys. But these people are meeting in support groups all over the country, and it's not really on anyone's radar because they keep it very quiet. But that's where these experiences are being discussed and analyzed and compared. And, there probably are researchers, like incipient John Max out there who may come forward. I don't know who they are, but certainly the experiences that these people are sharing are real enough for them to meet and compare notes.
All right, Tim. Well, we're going to let you get out of here, sir. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to do this and extending yourself and being here, because I know it's late over there in Germany. So we truly, truly appreciate it.
No, thanks to you guys. And I'll be looking forward to listening to the rest of the chat. If I don't finish it all before bedtime, I will check it out on YouTube. But thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
And awesome. Tim, in the super chat here, on your way out, Jay King says, Ralph, thanks for working with us and having us in your article. And thanks very much, Tim, for publishing it. So a lot of appreciation out there for what you're doing.
Jay. Yeah. No, absolutely, Jay. Thank you for saying that. But I think we definitely don't feel bad for it. Like I said, that is our motto, rebelliously curious.
Right.
So we just don't care if people can say what they want. We're not worried about that.
I want to say quickly, Tim, before you go, that your disclaimer on the piece, which there's been some comment about, I think was right on target. I think it was right to put it in that way, to frame it that way. It's not, I not only don't object to it, but I think it was proper that you distanced the UFO reporting, which is, corroborated by obviously stuff that the Navy has put out and witnessed, from the anecdotal part, which is not proven scientifically, which we, can't figure out, how to corroborate it. And yet it gives a voice to these people and accepts their experiences as legitimate in terms of needing further study, period.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for saying that, Ralph. And I wish I could take credit. That's all MJ. But I'm glad to hear that, because I know some of these things, you get used to it. People are always going to be upset, one way or another. But I hope people recognize that was our way of saying that, we put forth our due diligence in everything we do, and we're telling you full stop in this instance that these claims, and I think every one of the experiencers would acknowledge, I realize this is really extraordinary what I'm saying, but this is what I have to offer, and I'm putting myself out there, and this is an uncomfortable position. So they deserve that respect. And we're just saying that that's all we have here. In other instances, maybe we have background witnesses, we have documents, all these different things. We don't have that here, but we do think that it is important enough that we're willing to have it discussed in an open format, and so that nobody thinks that, we're not trying to force it as truth, because like we've just said, I think for a lot of these people, they just want the truth. They don't want us to tell them what the truth is, and that's not really our job.
I feel like we're not forcing the truth. We're forcing the conversation.
Sure, and that's the only way we get the next John Max, who is taken from this world far too soon. But that's how we get those people, and so I look forward to seeing their work.
And we're making the skeptics and debunkers more honest by forcing them to read the material. You can't be a skeptic unless you know what you're skeptical against. So don't just come out with a theory or hypothesis without knowing what these accounts are and why they are so deeply troubling.
They will try, though. Don't you?
Yeah, they're going to try until the cows come home.
Don't get past the headline or already complaining for not just your article, all sorts of stuff. That's okay.
I'm used to it.
Yeah. I love the people that hate watch.
Thanks, Tim.
It's great.
Thanks,
all right, we'll see you, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the super chat, Amanda Rose, $10. Once science is able to get a better understanding and proof of alternate dimensions and realities, the public may feel comfortable considering metaphysics and abductions. That's a conversation we have around here a lot, because we talk about, I can't remember who we were talking to, but he does a lot of research in this area, and he was talking to some friends about potential extraterrestrial races and all this sort of thing, and people were okay with this conversation, but then he started talking about remote viewing and like they all shut down. So it's interesting what people are willing to entertain when it comes to metaphysics and parapsychology and all of these sorts of things, and what they're completely unwilling to entertain. Fascinating.
Michael, this is what you just said is really very interesting, because I have found in my research for the believer, that a group that believes in one anomaly, let's say, or studies one anomaly like Bigfoot, will have no truck with crop circles.
Right.
And the people who are interested in life after death or survival of consciousness, they think alien abduction is crazy. So there is that kind of tunnel vision for one anomaly. You'd think that everybody would understand and respect each other because they're all part of some huge mystery. And this is what John Mack came to understand at the end of his life. They're really part of the same large mystery. We don't understand any of it. But the way the world works, it separates into camps, and
factions.
This group, will believe this, but they think this is worth studying, but this is crazy. So we have to get beyond that.
Right. It's actually interesting. We were discussing this the other day on the Singularity Lab. It's called in-group bias. You unfairly favor those who belong to your group. We presume that we're fair and impartial, but the truth is that we automatically favor those who are most like us or belong to our groups. It's exactly how this stuff breaks down.
On the other hand, it's important not to just accept everything. In my book, I have a little anecdote about an interview John Mack gave to Psychology Today, which turned out to be very critical of him. But the woman, the reporter who questioned him, said, I thought it was a great line. She said, "Do you have to put on the whole bloody snowsuit? Like believe everything?" And he said, no. You said you take each thing on its own and you evaluate it. So that's a little different perspective on the same issue. It doesn't mean you have to accept every crazy thing. Ghosts. They're all separate. They may be related in some dimension we don't understand, but it doesn't mean that every time there's something we don't understand, we have to accept it as reality. It just means that a lot of different things are worth study.
Absolutely. And I think it's just important for us to separate ourselves from these factions and these groups and just look for the truth. Try to figure out in what aspect of this particular piece of the puzzle do we understand. And let's dig deeper and try to gather information. Jazz Shaw has a 25.
Well, I was going to say, wait,
ahead.
Hold on. Yeah, I want to just comment on what you just said. That's a huge ask. It's a huge ask for people to be like, hey, that group that you think exactly like, and all you guys are buddies, and you've been buddies since, I don't know, birth. Maybe think outside of that bubble. That's
the big ask.
That's the issue with everything other than this topic. Like people getting outside of their thought process, getting outside of what they think they know. It's a hard ask for them to be like, listen, you need to drop everything you think you know and just shut up and listen. Just listen. And it's hard. It's really, really difficult. But yeah, please read Jazz Shaw's 25.
It is difficult. And but that's what we do here at the Unidentified Celebrity Review and the Singularity Lab. We push you out of your comfort zone.
Ourselves. Look, this topic for me is out of my comfort zone, even though I'm an experiencer. Like I have seen a ship, so if anyone in the room should believe this hand over fist, it should be me. Like it should be me. But even with that said, it's very, very difficult for me to believe it. It is.
Right.
It's difficult.
But we're not asking you to believe it. We're asking for everybody to keep an open mind and listen. That's it.
And contemplate what it could be.
Not what it. Like I don't want you to believe.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, just put the thought in your brain of what it could be to believe. You have to be open-minded. You have to think from those perspectives, even if it's only for 5 minutes out of your whole day. Just put yourself in those shoes, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Is what this conversation
and it's
really needs.
Luis, it's not only a question of quote just believing blindly, but there are fragmentary bits of evidence that John Mack mulled over that were really kind of interesting. And he put it all together to say that at least all the facile explanations don't work. And the kind of things that he fastened on that were interesting were things like the association of UFOs with abduction experiences, that very often, not always, but very often, people who during the night, let's say, and it didn't only happen at night, but people during the night who had these abduction experiences or encounters became aware of UFOs outside the window near the house. So there was an association between them, that sometimes they woke up with unexplained scars and marks that they didn't remember having before. This came up again and again and again. That there was a consistency to the experiences and yet a lot of little differences. So it was not like a playbook that was being recited by everybody. Let's all agree to this one story.
Right.
So, and you know, the fact that little kids were having these experiences, as I said, there's one case that John Mack really found compelling. He wrote about two girls who had a sleepover, teenage girls. And during the night, the mother of one of the girls came down to check on them and found them missing. And she called the police, obviously panicked, and the police came and searched everywhere and found no sign of the girls. And a few hours later, they were found back in their beds. And later, the girls recalled seeing a UFO outside the window and some kind of an abduction experience. So this was a case, a fairly unusual case of a third party, the mother, corroborating these girls' accounts in some ways, saying that they were missing. Now, not in all cases were people missing during abductions. There's another case I write about a woman who fainted in her husband's arms. And while he was holding her, she imagined that she was flying up into the sky, being, taken somewhere. And she, had all this astral travel, and then it came back to earth into her body. But he said later he was holding her the whole time. So those are two different experiences, one showing an absence, one showing no absence, completely contradicting each other, yet they're both, fascinating cases. So what we've got to do, as I said, and you all agreed, is look at the data and just look at and try to understand at least the reports of these experiences before we jump to conclusions of what they are.
Right. Please, I feel Jazz in the room. Can you read his question? I feel like even though he's not here, you're muted, Mike. I feel like even though,
right,
even though Jazz is not here, I can feel him going, would you read my question?
I see the question.
For both Ralph and Tim, do you think believe in life beyond death is more appealing to those of us, me too, who are closer to the end of their lives than young, immortal people?
Probably. It certainly was the case with John Mack. He became very consumed with that in his later years. And when he was run over in London and killed at almost age 75, he was in the process of investigating survival of consciousness, some very interesting cases. And in some way, I don't want to say he was committing suicide. That would not be true. But he was very interested in what was on the other side, if anything. And he was curious about, like he was curious about so many things in his life. So, and that came with age. And I guess the closer you get to that river Styx, the more you begin to wonder what's waiting for me, if anything. So I think it is common for people. When you're young, you don't even think about that. You don't care. You don't think about death. You don't think about the end of your life. It's all ahead of you. But the closer you get to the end, of course, you're going to be thinking more about it. So
it's so funny. The last week and a half, I've really been thinking about this, and I think I'm hitting a midlife crisis, like where I'm like constantly now just thinking about death, and I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? So it's comforting to hear that. Feels like a lot of people go through that. But real quick, let's get in these super chat questions. Another one from Brian McDonald, $10, says, recently watched Project Unity mini doc on endogenous DMT. Is this an increasing area of study vis-a-vis the UAP?
I know what he's referring to, that there's been a lot of research into the spirit molecule, DMT, and a good book written about it. And John Mack experimented with psychedelics, and he experimented with holotropic breathing, which is another way of raising your consciousness without drugs. It's long been thought that there is some correlation between altered states of reality that we can experience with drugs or holotropic breathing. and the other reality that these experiencers or abductees, are subject to. And the question is, well, is this do drugs explain it? In other words, is it akin to drugs? Well, a lot of the people who've had these experiences are not taking drugs, but it does show that there are experiences that we can't explain, other realities. In my book, I talk about a holotropic breathing session that John Mack attended, where he felt himself back in the womb. His mother died when he was 8.5 months old of appendicitis, and he always mourned her. But he was too young to really know, understand what had happened to her. She was just gone. But in this holotropic breathing session, which is just as he first got into, learned about alien abduction phenomenon, he found himself born back to childhood and pre-birth, struggling to be born. And he thought later, well, this is another example of free-floating consciousness, that, the consciousness is not the physical brain. It's something else that we tune into, and that may be, completely free-flowing in the cosmos. And that might explain, some of these other abnormal or paranormal experiences. And these drugs do mimic that. I mean, people go flying, astral flying, and Stanislav Grof, who introduced Mack to holotropic breathing, really started off by investigating LSD. He came from Czechoslovakia and had a whole program of LSD study at Johns Hopkins. Anyway, so it's a long roundabout answer to the question that there is some interesting correlations between, effects of these psychedelic drugs and the experiences some of these experiences have had.
But it is fascinating too, because you have three very different aspects of study, right? You have the study of consciousness, you have the abduction and experiencer phenomenon, and you have potential UFO encounters. And they're all very different things, but it's interesting because there obviously seems to be some sort of overlap between them, but I find it very difficult to even talk about those overlaps because people are very interested in their specific, and I know we talked about this before, but like some people just want the nuts and bolts of UFO. Let's focus, like Avi Loeb, right? When you and Avi were on the Big Phone Home the other day, that was one of the things that Avi said. He said, I'm not interested in the human belief system. I'm not interested in the consciousness. I'm not interested in the experiencer abduction scenario. I just want the nuts and bolts. And I think there's value in that, and there's value in the experiencer, and there's value in all these. I just think there needs to be some sort of way that we can study this from a meta level, a 35,000 foot view, and go, okay, yes, you guys, it's fine that you specialize in these particular things, but we need people able to bridge these things as well and talk about them under one banner. So I think I definitely appreciate that.
I feel like that onus is on science, because that's the whole job of science, is to talk to each other. And if science is going, I know they don't, but it's contradictory. It's speaking out of two sides of your mouth. Like science needs to say, okay, this clearly pushes our belief systems. This clearly pushes what we think is science, but they're the ones who have to start talking about it. It's not us. We've been wanting to talk about this for 70 plus years. It's science going, no, thank you. We'll pass.
Well, Louis, that's exactly right. Science is basically determining the debate. And a good example of that is SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They are setting up these extraordinary telescopes to look for signs of radio signals in the universe, cosmos, that would indicate intelligent life. So scientists, that's a very firmly accepted scientific pursuit. SETI, Carl Sagan did it, but they won't go. But they're not expanding that to say, well, let's look at the experiences that people on Earth have had, and maybe that's a counterpart to the search for intelligent life. They say, no, we're going to set up our telescopes and listen for these radio signals. So there is that kind of divide. And Avi, I'm sure, would have no quarrel with the search for extraterrestrial life, because that's a strictly scientific search using telescopes. And science likes instruments. They don't like the human instrument.
Right.
Except scientists like John Mack, who are psychiatrists who study the human instrument. But other scientists, physicists, etc., don't like the complications of humanity getting in the way,
right?
Because there's so many other things that are difficult. One scientist told John Mack, I quote in the book, that we have enough trouble with our telescopes. Don't give me human beings.
Yeah, and that's exactly where Abby's coming from, and I get it. But there's no bridge between psychology and physics, right? And there needs to be a bridge, and I don't see science taking up that mantle anytime soon.
Well, the human element is much more complicated, much more difficult, because there you get into very subjective things, and you have to understand, who's doing the observing, and you have to do a workup on each person, because that could explain the aberrations. So you've got to rule out, which John Mack tried to do, all the other things that could explain these experiences. Is the person crazy? Is the person traumatized? Does the person have a motive in making stuff up? And he ruled these things out. These people were not publicity seekers. On the contrary, they were shunning publicity. Right. But you have to rule all these things out before you can understand the nature of their experience. So that makes it much, much more complicated than a completely objective scientific observation through a telescope.
Right, because humans are susceptible and suggestible, right?
So real quick, Sonic Gravity with a $10 donation, who says consciousness is energy on the surface of a black hole. Just saying. Yeah, that's okay. All right, fair enough. Sonic Gravity, this is hilarious. Basically, science is like plugging their ears in with the fingers and just going la 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 as we're trying to have this. Science is going to be forced to deal with this, but they're going to go in kicking and screaming. They're not going to go into this quietly. Or willingly. They're gonna be their hands gonna be forced on this for sure.
Well, I got to say that, and again, this is in my book, that the end of the book talks about the billions and billions of dollars that science is spending, legitimately spending, to investigate the cosmos. And for example, just 2 years ago, there was a picture, actually, a image of a black hole 55 million light years away. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. And it made headlines around the world that science got this picture of a black hole 55 million years, and you can add zeros to infinity to show you what that number is. And yet we have a picture of it. And after billions and billions of collisions, they found the tiny particle that may make up 95%, may help understand what makes up 95% of the universe. The dark energy and dark matter, they have no idea what it is. So they found the Higgs boson, one little particle after billions of collisions underground. And out of all that expenditure to find these things, which are huge breakthroughs scientifically, but they're not spending any money to monitor these UFOs or UAP. And the Pentagon report that came out June 25th said that they started studying these things seriously in 2019 and 2020. I mean, come on. That's when they started, really compiling the data. That's what the government said. So take them at their word. So now we're beginning to look at this data. It's been around forever. And, these stories, which certainly proliferated after World War II and, with Roswell and Kent Arnold and all that. I mean, now they're compiling the data. So it's a little late. I'm glad they're doing it. But, they have not been spending money on this search compared to the billions and billions they've spent in other things, which, again, I'm not taking away from that. That's very important science.
Cognitive dissonance with a $5 donation. One thing that'll be hard for experiencers is people to start to seriously consider their stories is to avoid the tendency to say they have all the answers.
That is an amazing comment, by the way. I love that comment.
And Bottle Water with a $20 dono. Science will be forced to deal with the abduction issue when a repeat abductee allows someone to surveil them and gets definitive evidence of abduction on film. That where I punch an alien in the face and throw it.
I already know where Ralph is going to go with this, because I read the article And I feel like if these things operate the way that he describes or these experiencers describe, that's going to be impossible. Impossible.
You
These
know
things
what?
go through walls.
Randy
They
Nickerson,
come through portals.
right. Randy Nickerson tried that. He's one of Mac's earliest experiencers. He's in the Mac book. He came forward under his own name. He's doing a film. I've seen the rough cut on the episode at the children's school in Zimbabwe, where children, saw craft and beings in 1995. Very famous episode. And he tried to set up a camera and record these. These things don't come out. There's always some malfunction. That's the nature of the phenomenon. It does not lend itself to being photographed, whatever it is. I talked earlier about on Christina Gomez's show about what's that ranch? Skinwalker Ranch. And they try to measure and they take pictures of things because all kinds of weird stuff was going on there. And they had 2 cameras set up and they intersect with intersecting fields of vision. And one camera during the night had its guts ripped out very deliberately, apparently, somehow. And the other camera, which was trained on it, it crossed the field of vision, recorded nothing happening with that other camera. So here's one camera looking at another camera. One camera had its, was tampered with. The other camera recorded nothing of what happened. That happens all the time in this phenomenon. I can't explain it, but it is a given in this field that it doesn't lend itself to being filmed, photographed. Even the UFO pictures have not been great. And now the Navy has, superior imaging devices. So yes, there is proof that these things physically exist. So that's a big breakthrough. But we don't have any pictures of alien abduction. Let's say no accredited or accepted pictures of aliens and abductions. So for some reason that doesn't, it's not available on film or doesn't allow itself to be filmed. You figure it out. I don't know what the answer is.
$10 donation from Sonic Gravity. When you solve the matter, or when you solve the dark matter mystery and unravel all the mysteries of theoretical physics, they'll just ignore you. Trust me. It's very probably.
That's Bradley Voorhees. That, by the way.
Oh, is that Bradley?
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
yeah,
man.
He's furious at this point. He's been trying. He feels like he's solved a lot of things, and no theoretical physicist will take him seriously because he has no credentials, which is wrong.
Well, I mean, I would say try, APEC, I think the fringe science is going to have to be considered in this discussion. Just like we talk about the candle maker. The candle maker didn't invent the light bulb, but at some point the candle maker was the guy who knew how to provide light in the world. But he didn't invent that, the next evolution of that. So I'd say just be patient. Just be a patient, Voorhees. I think it's going to come. So I do have some personal questions for you, Ralph. If that's okay.
Sure.
Why are you such a champion for this? Have you ever had an experience, Ralph?
I have not. Like John Mack, I have not. I've never seen a UFO. I've not been abducted. The closest I ever came to this field was reading science fiction as a kid. I was, it was part of the culture when I grew up. Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, fascinating voyages to Mars, to the moon. I mean, real science fiction. But I'm not a believer in fringe things. I'm sort of spiritual in that I believe that there's something out there we don't understand, religiously. So I'm not a member of any conventional, group.
So what is it about this topic that
what it is?
You're very passionate about it.
It's like everything else. I spent my career at the Times writing about the mafia and the Holocaust and Nazi war criminals and law enforcement and crooked cops and crooked politicians and doing investigative reporting. And it was just another thing that intrigued me. I happened, it was, again, synchronistic. A book of John Mack's dropped into my lap when I was a correspondent in Texas. And I thought it was interesting that a Harvard psychiatrist is interested in aliens. And I thought I would call him up and maybe interview him. I had no idea that he was already so famous. I'd never heard of him. And he was famous. He'd been on Oprah. He'd written his books. I'd never heard of him. So I was going to call him up, and then I find out he was run over in London and killed. So I contacted the family and said, gee, I'd like to know more about him. Can I get access to his papers? And eventually I could and did. So it was just another thing to look into. That was interesting.
But the thing is, though, I mean, I feel like you're on the verge of retirement, right? Pretty much. I mean, you work freelance.
But I'm now a distinguished lecturer at Baruch College. I work in the archives. I study, a history of government and reform government, and I write about that. Right. I was just on a program talking about Roosevelt and the Supreme Court. So, I have a lot of interests. I'm not,
this
Johnny
is not the only thing.
It's not the only thing, but it's interesting. And the more I got into it, the more interesting I found it because, as I say in the book and elsewhere, that at least I can rule out certain things. I know what the phenomenon is not. It's not the easy thing that, people explain away. Oh, these people are crazy, or they're deluded, or they're experiencing, sleep paralysis. So all the things that people have thrown out over the years to explain this, they think they explain it, don't explain it. And that bothers me, that there's a lot of misinformation around. So that sort of brought out the crusader in me that, gee, I want to know more about this. And I found John Mack a kind of a fascinating figure to study because he wouldn't give up. He wasn't perfect, by the way. He was too enthusiastic. He didn't take proper caution in presenting his ideas at Harvard. He was bound to run into trouble at Harvard just because he was sort of injudicious in some of his approaches. He was overconfident, but he was brave and he was honest. And he was very curious, and that intrigued me as a journalist. But it's not my, it's not my crusade. This is not, right. Something that I feel I was born to bring into the world. I'll look into it. I'll write whatever I can. I'll look into it as critically as I can, and then I'll write about other things too.
Well, man, we got to get you in the room with Avi Loeb again, because when we did have that conversation, I could see there were things that Avi was saying where you're just like, no, like, why are you talking like this? Like, this is so unscientific. Because I mean, there was things where he was, calling things like the Alcubierre drive, fantasy and make believe, and it's like, wait a second.
He's very, he's a scientist, and right. I think, given what happened to John Mack at Harvard, Avi Loeb has not been brought up on any, by any committee at Harvard like John Mack was, because his approach is really, much more grounded and more understandable. He's an astronomer. John Mack was a psychiatrist, so there's a lot of room for different approaches. And Avi's been very careful in what he said, and I admire him. I told him that. I read his book. I think it's an excellent book. Yeah. But we could have a good discussion, he and I, because he stops short at a certain point. Says, "I'm not going there. I'm not discussing what's the human element. I'm not dealing with the human element."
Right.
So we could have a discussion.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be fun. We got to set that up again, Michael. And then the last sort of personal question I had for you, because I am curious. I saw your partner walking in the background. So I what does she think when you're sitting here doing interviews like this? Like, is she tired of hearing about this? Is like when you're at, a dinner party or something and someone's like, so Ralph, tell us what you're working on. And you start talking about your book and the experiencing aspect. Like, where's she at with this, and where your peers at? Like, I'm just curious, like, how do they receive this information?
Well, my wife is used to it, and she knows that if somebody pushes my button at a dinner party or so, I'm hard to stop because it all starts to pour out of me. But no, she's read everything I've written beforehand. Has given me good criticism. She is. I think she's come to agree with me that there's a lot of things that we don't understand in this world. She's, John Mack's wife, just to segue off this for a minute, she supported his work too. She didn't believe necessarily everything that he believed, but she thought he was honest and he was on the right track of something interesting. And even though he wasn't always faithful to her, which is another part of his story, he was always searching for the missing woman in his life, unlike me, for example. My wife is a great support to me, and may not share all my interest in this field, but certainly thinks it's worth studying. My colleagues, they're varying reactions. People at the Times, some of them don't want to hear about it. Frankly, some of my colleagues are not interested in that. That world of UFOs and anomalies. But I must say that editors have been very supportive. And when Leslie and I and Helene Cooper came in with the evidence for our first article in December 2017 about the secret unit ATIP that was studying UFOs and no one knew about, a Pentagon office that was actually compiling data with $22 million in black money provided by Senator Harry Reid, we had the goods. And they put the story on the front page on a Sunday with two and later the third video of the Navy encounters. And it got huge viewership. We followed up with a number of other stories, also tremendous reader response, a lot of support from the editors because they saw it as a good story. So, that's the best I can say.
That's a great answer. So I'm going to read these $5 these chats real quick, Michael, and I'm sure you've got a question because I've taken the last few, so sorry about that.
No,
we need a holistic, multidiscipline approach to all these subjects. Scientists are too dogmatic due to one eye always being on their future funding, and that's a fair comment, I believe. And then we had another $20 donation, I believe, from Bottled Water. And he was saying something about punching Mick West in the face, but I can't pull
we got that one. We got that one already. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And
he
then
just had another one though. Yeah, go
the experiencer with a $5 donation. Thank you so much. Next time, please ask a question with it. And then Bottled Water again with a $10 donation. Guys, by the way, thank you so much for all these super chats. Just wonderful. Ralph, honest question. What would be the best place of evidence for you? Does it need to come from the government or he said, okay, actually it's two questions. So what would be the best piece of evidence for you?
Evidence, if you're talking about evidence of UFOs, we have it now. We have the Navy videos. There's a lot of stuff that has not been released that the Navy has, and the Air Force came a little later to the compilation of data, but they have it too. So UFOs, that's not really a controversy anymore. That those things exist. What they are, as I said, we don't know, but that they exist. The evidence is there, and that's in cold scientific, measurement kind of truth. They have that. Alien encounters is much more difficult. I think, Jacques Vallée, who's a titan in this field, and Gary Nolan at Stanford are doing some interesting research on trying to understand possible changes in the human body after people have had encounter experiences. I think that is a huge potential area of study. Very promising because there've been some bits of information coming forth of people who've had close encounters and have suffered various effects after that. So I think that would be a very fruitful path to study effects on the human body, and some people are doing it. I think the government has to do much more on that. Maybe the Havana syndrome might be related to that, in that there's strange effects that people have been suffering, diplomats and military personnel around the world through some kind of radiotronic weapons, perhaps, or something. But perhaps there's some intersection. I know there are some people studying that. It's extremely secretive, but it's ongoing. So that to me is the most interesting research going on, because it does lend itself to scientific study. It's not anti-science. The accounts are anecdotal, but there are ways of measuring things. And I think that we can look ahead to that as a promising field.
So you do believe that we'll be able to, in this field specifically regarding experiencers, do you think we should be looking to move forward with studies that can be, physically founded?
Yeah, I think we should and could, because the anecdotal accounts only get you so far. You can
Right.
you can listen to somebody's account and rule out all the other explanations. They're not crazy. They're not deluded. They're not looking for profit. They haven't. They're not recycling a book they read or a movie they saw. You rule out all that, and you're still left with a mystery. So how do you move forward from that? Well, you try to see something that can be measured scientifically without controversy, some effect on their body, perhaps. Radio brain waves. Where does their brain go in different parts of this experience? So that I do think it is possible to move ahead with some kind of scientific study of the encounter experience. It's not easy, but because, as I said, attempts to catch it on film and this and that, it hasn't worked for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean that it can't be, that nothing can be done. So
Right.
I have hopes.
Michael, did you have any other questions right now?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just curious, like, and I really appreciate it, Ralph, because, you've done so much work on this topic, and I know it's not easy, and, being able to bring it to the debrief and the debrief bringing it forward, I think it's so powerful because we need people to be able to have this conversation. I think one of the most dangerous things that we see is when you leave out information or when you leave things off the table, people tend to make up their own responses and ideas and fill in the gaps with storytelling. And again, going back to the original concept or the original point that we were making earlier, it's not for you to believe. I don't think that anybody, who's in this room right now is trying to force any belief down anybody's throat. What we're asking is that you keep an open mind and understand these are real human beings with real experiences. We don't know what those experiences are, or how they came to be, or how they're manifested in their lives. But what we do know is that they're very real to those people, and there needs to be a modicum of respect that's paid. And when this topic is talked about, it needs to be talked about in a dignified way, not from a purely negative, skeptical perspective. There's nothing wrong with skepticism. I think we should be skeptical, but scientifically skeptical, not avoiding the subject altogether and not doing our due diligence to understand what's actually happening here versus just making a judgment or falling onto a bias.
I mean, this field has always been prone to ridicule, and that's why Congress has been very reluctant to provide funding for studies. Why people in Congress won't even bring up the subject. They handle it with a 10-foot pole, if anything, and that's a problem. Harry Reid was very brave to get funding for this ATIP program, because he was concerned by the same questions that so many other people were concerned about. But he came forward, and he said one of his biggest disappointments is that other members of Congress, when he was majority leader, were not backing him up and coming forward. They told him privately that they supported him, but they were very afraid of being attached to the subject in any way, because there's the giggle factor. People make fun of him, and they were afraid, the people in Congress were afraid their opponents would seize on it in the next election and say, oh yeah, he believes in UFOs. And it would hurt them. So that has held back a legitimate study. But now, as it's been presented as a threat, a potential threat, suddenly, it's worth serious study. And I don't think it's any more of a threat now than it was, in 1947, if ever. But now in the competition with the Russians and the Chinese, they're saying, well, gee, we got to find out what these things are. Could they be Russian? Could they be Chinese? Well, they're not, because the Russians and Chinese are just as puzzled about these things as we are. And they're doing their own research, probably more aggressively, because they don't have to worry about public opinion the way we do. But but now that it's seen as a potential threat, there's probably a chance they'll get, more funding.
Well, I think there's also a flip side to what you said, Michael, and that is that, nobody's asking us to believe, right? But there's got to be an onus put on the experiencers. Like, look, just because you've had this experience doesn't mean you have the answers.
And it doesn't mean you should believe somebody. You shouldn't force somebody else to believe you, right?
Agreed, but I feel like a lot. And I'm painting a brush here, but the experiencers, not every experiencer, but a lot of them get aggressive when you can't wrap your brain.
When you don't validate
when you don't validate their experience, because it's crazy. Not crazy that you're crazy, but it's just crazy. It's a crazy concept for people to digest and think about. So when they don't confirm your experience, you have to, like, I feel like they have to have a little bit of patience with people that just don't understand it or are flippant about it. And I think sort of that's where when I get like that, I deal with things with humor. Like, I try to laugh at it because it's funny. Like, for me, if I had an experience something crazy like this, like some of the things that you described in this article, Ralph, with portals and mantis and grays and these beings, like, it's hilarious. Like, it is funny. And I think that's the best way to deal with it, is humor. So that way we can get past the bias of everything, and now that we've laughed at it, kind of have a conversation about it. But,
and on the flip side of that, when you laugh at that and you invalidate somebody's experience that could have been traumatic, then now you're sending them in a trauma loop.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is that the experiencer should be able to laugh at themselves. That's what they do. That would be like my best advice is, hey, if you could try and laugh at this, I think you'll be able to mentally work through it better. But yeah, Ralph, you're saying.
No, I was going to say you're absolutely right. But in my experience is that these experiencers do realize, the ones I've talked to do realize the difficulty that they're in of ever explaining to even their family, their spouses, what they've encountered, that they're pretty subdued. They're not out there screaming from the rooftops. You got to believe me, this is my story. On the other hand, they're really reluctant to discuss these things. And you're right, they do feel wounded by society, not believing them or thinking they're writing them off as crazy. But you mentioned something else that I think is very important, and I think I highlighted in the 4 experiencer accounts that I include in my article, that these things are so unimaginable. These experiences, they do not follow a playbook. That they get kidnapped by aliens, put on a flying saucer, subject to medical experiments, have their eggs removed, sperm, create a hybrid race. That's sort of a story that comes up. But when you look more deeply into the stories, they are so different and so impossibly weird that you almost think that they could not be made up, because who would have the imagination to come up with these stories? I mean, and they are so different one and the other. There's a consistency to the general narrative, let's say, which is what impressed John Mack, and others. But on the other hand, there is such a proliferation of deep, crazy detail and things that people have, and all they say is, look, I can't explain this, but this is what happened. And you can read that in the Debrief article. As you said, portals opening up and mantis beings and, 4 beings merged into one with 4 heads. And I mean, stuff that is absolutely extraordinary. And all you can say is that these people say that this is what happened to them. They can't explain it. And it's out there. But again, we eliminate all the other things. They're not crazy, these people. They're not doing it for profit. They're not recycling a book or movie they read, because no book has ever had this. And there are little bits of corroborating information. There are marks. There's, the syndrome of red marks on the backs of some people that I've become aware of that seems to have no explanation whatsoever. The red marks in the shape of a pyramid form or so that people have encountered, not necessarily relating to abductions or UFOs, but this red mark syndrome. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's so many strange parts of this story that it doesn't lend itself to any easy explanation. I mean, we just have to look on it slack-jawed and say, my God, what possibly could be explaining this. But at least we have to be humble and be open to understanding and take one step at a time. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to reveal its secrets very soon, it seems to me.
Yeah. Well, one funny detail, and this kind of answers this $10 super chat, at least from my point of view. Ralph, do you have any humorous anecdotes from your abductee experiences? And the one thing that I found funny, and I know Michael's got to get out of here, and we're running up against the clock for you too as well, Ralph. So we'll get out of here in a few minutes. But the one thing I found that was funny, that was a common thread, was they're little kleptomaniacs. They like to steal things, little knickknacks here and there.
Well, there are millions of funny stories. I mean, Betty and Barney Hill, the most famous abduction story of all, which I cite quickly in the Debrief article. You know, they were the first couple who went public with a big abduction story in 1965. And Betty told the story, again, under hypnosis, and it was sort of coaxed out of her because she didn't remember it all. But she, at one point, said she grabbed a book on board a craft. She wanted some proof that this actually happened, and she said, "Could I have that book?" And this being who was, tending to her said, "Okay." So she got the book, and before she was released and sent back to her car, they said, "Give the book back." And she said, "Oh, I need this book to prove that this happened." And they said, "I know, but you can't have it." And took it back, and she was very angry and said, she didn't want to give it back. She had to give it back anyway. Again, the story, people say it's absolutely crazy. She had a book, an alien book, and she had to give it back. Well, you ask for a humorous story, that's one.
I think you're muted, Lou, if you're trying to talk.
Yep, you're right. $10 super chat question. I think we need to make sure the threat, in quotes, narrative doesn't push the UAP research to DOD, resulting in the militarization of space science. NASA should be in the lead, in my opinion. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good comment. I think, there've been various accounts over the years of commands to shoot down a UFO. And I think there was actually some attempts made, and the missiles didn't take effect, or they couldn't be fired. I mean, it's another example of these strange things that, that whatever they are, they interfere with technology. They, if you believe some of the stories, they prevented, they went out to the missile silos and disabled the missiles. There was a whole book written about that. So, I think the writer's right that there's a danger of seeing things in military terms. We've got to shoot these things down, or we've got to see them as military threats. They have not been a threat so far as we know, in terms of taking any hostile action against the United States, attacking any facilities. It hasn't worked that way. Even though, Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs particularly saw the alien presence as some kind of a threat to humanity, that they were on a mission to co-opt humanity or so. I mean, it's obviously all speculation, but that's what they took from the story. John Mack didn't take that. He saw rather other messages in the encounters. But anyway, I think it's right. There's a danger of militarizing the issue.
This is I love Bottled Water's comment here. I've never seen a Greenland shark. I've seen some videos of them. Maybe I should take the UFO approach and pretend they're not real. Just saying. That's true. Case for Infinity. This is great. And actually, this is going to be the question I leave off. Not Case for Infinities. I'm going to sort of double on his question, and then I'll let you guys go, and we'll finish out the last half hour. But Case for Infinity says, in honor of John Mack, would Luis be willing to visit a hypnotist to find the missing details in his UFO encounter? Yeah, sure, I'd be willing to do it, but I think I don't know. I'm going to sort of rely on Ralph here on maybe, because I don't feel like I had missing time. I think it's just because it's a 33-year-old memory is the reason why I can't remember parts of it. But I am curious, because Michael and I have really been having this discussion, and I see some people sort of think that my dealing of humor with things is maybe not the best route to go. That's how I deal with trauma, right? Is I try to laugh at it. And I think you guys are right by saying, well, not everybody deals with trauma with humor, and that's fair. So my question to you is, and I'm hoping maybe you can help us with this in the near future, but we really want to devote not just a week, but a couple of weeks to this experience or discussion, but we want to be able to have this discussion where we can question things but not insult people at the same time. And it's a fine balance because, again, this is trauma sometimes and what people are dealing with. So what would be your suggestion for this show? Do we bring in a psychologist? Do we bring in a hypnotist? What kind of medical professional can we bring in? Is there anybody that you could recommend that could sort of help us navigate these discussions and experiences?
That's an interesting question. What I found with John Mack is that whenever he brought experiences onto a mass medium kind of a show like Oprah, so it turned into a circus.
Right.
And these experiences, these people and their accounts don't really fit well in a broadcast setting. They're tender experiences. They're controversial. They're painful, and whenever you reduce them to airtime or portray them, in a public way, it tends to come out as a circus. So that's the big danger. That the stories are often ludicrous, and the people are ashamed. Maybe they shouldn't be. Because it's not their doing, but they're ashamed about what happened. They certainly are ashamed to talk about their sexual experiences that they remember. So to put that in a public forum is very difficult. You can get psychiatrists talking about it, but getting the experiences to do it, the ones I've seen, the shows, have really not worked out very well. They've been painful, and it's just too awkward a subject.
But I mean, this discussion is going to have to be had on that kind of form at some point, right?
I guess so. I mean, that's why I have a little bit of an advantage as a print journalist, talking to these people, without a camera, privately, and you get much more that way. I know the support groups, would not lend themselves to, being filmed, let's say, like all therapy groups, sexual survivor groups. So they'd be very wary of being on camera talking about, because everything changes the dynamic. Let's face it, your medium, whether it's a podcast or a video or a film, is a very unforgiving and intrusive one, and it changes the dynamic. When you're off camera, you can talk to people in a different way. Right. So it's very difficult, and it just it's hard to find people who are willing to come forward and talk honestly about their experiences in such a public. Well, it was hard enough for me to get them to talk to me off camera, and I really worked on that to find the right people and get them to talk to me. And they were nervous about it too. How is this going to come out? And am I going to look like a nut? But to do that on camera is very difficult. On the other hand, everything can be done, some way. People can be shot in shadow, let's say, or in some way, and and there's some people who are more willing to come forward. Some people have already come forward. People like Whitley Strieber, for example, is an old hand at public discussion, and he's had some of the most amazing experiences that don't lend themselves to the usual narrative. Not the usual spaceship abduction, but just seeing strange beings, and which he's talked about. He's a real leader in the field and very articulate and a great writer. But I hear what you're saying, but I think it's a difficult task.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, we'll explore it. I know you guys have to go, so I'm going to let everybody go. Michael's got a dinner that he's got to get to. So Michael, I'm going to let you get out of here now. Is there anything you'd like to say before you get out of here?
Thanks, guys. Ralph, really appreciate it, man. It was always a pleasure spending time with you. I really appreciate you joining us. All right.
It was a pleasure to do that piece. I really appreciate the chance.
It was an amazing piece. Great I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I wished it was longer. I wanted to read more. But we appreciate both your time, and I'll talk to you gentlemen soon.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Ciao.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, you guys. So that was a conversation we had with Ralph Blumenthal. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me just go ahead and close this out here. Come up. There we go. Hey, guys. So yeah, some breaking news. While we were listening to that replay, former Senate Majority Leader of 30 years, Harry Reid, has passed away. There was a really nice quote from Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak. He issued the following statement. To say Harry Reid was a giant doesn't fully encapsulate all that he accomplished on behalf of the state of Nevada and for Nevada families. There will always be another leader. There will never be another leader quite like Senator Reid. To me, he was a mentor, a father figure, and someone I trusted to always give it to me straight. I'm heartbroken by the news of his passing. Kathy and I extend our deepest condolences to his family, friends, and loved ones. We are especially thinking of Harry's forever love, Landra. Perhaps what I appreciate most about Senator Reid's legacy is he never forgot who he was or where he came from. From humble beginnings in Searchlight, he became one of the state's most powerful and fiercest advocates in Washington, D.C. He spent his life and career fighting the good fight for all Nevadans. I feel lucky to have known him. I'm beyond thankful for the moments we shared. He will be so deeply missed, but the mark he left on the Silver State will last forever. So it sucks. I of course, the first thing I thought of was me. I was like, oh man, I wish I had reached out and to see if we could get him on the show. I think it would have been possible, but as life is busy, I was hoping to do that this year with Senator Harry Reid. He was one of my circled people to definitely have a conversation with, and it's a real shame that I never got to do that. But the legacy that he leaves behind, all the good I think that he did for the UAP discussion from a political perspective, the monies that he secured, the programs that he helped fund, and to be so open about it and have discussions with all people, not just mainstream media. He had discussions with Max Moskowitz and with Sean Rash, and those were, I think Sean maybe even might have his last interview. So yeah, it's a bummer. But we can thank Harry Reid for everything that we've seen this year. It really started with that appropriation of that money for the OSAP program. And without him, I don't know if we get the New York Times article. I don't think this discussion is anywhere near as legitimate without Harry Reid. To have a former Senate Majority Leader of 30 years and was a big presence on the floor. And in politics, his contribution to this discussion is priceless. It's priceless. So rest in peace, Senator Harry Reid. Thank you for everything you helped us accomplish, and hopefully we can carry the torch and continue the work that you continue to blaze the trail that you blazed for us. The trail's not over. There's other people that got to pick up the machete and keep blazing away, but we'll pick it up for you. And yeah, it's a real shame anytime someone goes too early. 89 years old, that's a pretty long life, and I'm sure he saw a lot of wonderful things and experienced the best parts of life. So in some respects, he's very lucky to go out the way he did, but he earned that. He earned it. It's luck and hard work and grit and determination. So yeah, I guess we'll end there, you guys. I want to say thank you to everybody who was in the chat: Sparky Lady, Roger Davies, Stephen Devine, Machiavelli 2, let's see here, Waiting Aliens, Swink McLeod. Let's see here, Artisan Tony, Eventide, Aaron Desario, our moderator. Thank you guys so much for being here. This was a really fun episode, really cool discussion with some really great minds, and I can't wait to have Ralph back on the show. That'll be a really good time. But you know, I got a lot of work to do here this next week. We've got a lot of booking to do for this next new year, and Ralph is definitely on there. And guys, do me a favor, hit me up on Twitter at Lou Angeles. You can find the link in the link tree below. And tell me who you'd like to see on this year's panel of guests, you know, or show. Who would you like us to interview? I've put out a whole bunch of requests today. You know, and there's some, hopefully, I think we'll pretty realistic to get most of these folks that I've asked to be on the show to come on the show. But we'll see. We'll wait and see what happens. But yeah, hit me up on Twitter. Let me know who you'd like to see on the show. Tag the person you'd like to see on the show, and we'll see if we can make it happen if the schedules line up and everything works out. But I appreciate all of you guys being here and watching the top 10 UCR interviews of 2021. We've got 3 more of these left for the new year. Can you guys guess what the next 3 interviews are going to be? Let me know on Twitter. Hit me up again. Links are down below. Before we get out of here, I want to remind you guys this show will be available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Please leave us a rate and review. Helps the podcast grow. If you want to support the show through Patreon, your super chats, those are always great ways to support the show. But if you can't do financial support, don't sweat it. This show has no paywalls. Everything is available to everyone at the exact same time. So appreciate the support, however you could do it. But at the very least, please like, share the show, subscribe, and that's a really, really great start. Make sure you ring the bell as well, because like that interview that we just replayed, that was not a planned interview. That was sort of like a dropping, brand new interview. So I think we did that interview on a Tuesday before Known Quantities started. So sometimes that happens. Breaking news happens, and we'll go right into a live show. So if we can make that happen, okay, I see some suggestions here. Gillibrand, Rubio. Trust me, you guys, those are 2 I'm definitely gonna be bothering all year. Would love to get them on, even if it's only for 10 or 15 minutes each. That would be amazing. Michio Kaku, obviously, duh. I'm gonna try my butt off to make that happen. That would just be a dream come true. But yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate you stopping by, getting weird with me here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. Peace. I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.